Right, okay, welcome year 10 graphics. So this is about Photoshop basics, and this is the module where what we're going to be doing for the next few weeks while we're on lockdown. So today's learning, we're going to be looking into some of the basic functions that we use on the Adobe software Photoshop. We will identify and understand how to successfully use open, transform, layers, some functions from the adjustment panel, blend modes, and how to save a document. There are a couple of other things that we'll cover in there as well. Okay, so before we get going any further, you're going to need to have digital copies of the work you have completed. This means either scanning the work if you've got access to a scanner or photographing it. You can photograph your work with a camera or on a phone camera. Just be sure to make sure that you do it in a place where it's well lit, but also that you avoid things like reflections on the surface, for example, or that you don't take the image at odd angles, so you've just got the work to you've got the image nice and clear from above, bird's eye to work from, so it's not skewed in any way. You will need to download the Photoshop using the link provided on the announcement section of the Brightspace page for Year 10 graphics. It is on there. It also has some instructions on there on how you can do it. You'll need to use your school email basically to sign that up. You've been registered already through the school to Adobe, so you should be able to get that down and use the packages straight away. Again, instructions are included. If you do have any difficulties, then please troubleshoot first using any FAQs on the website. But after that, then you do get in touch with us. So, outcomes. So, you're going to learn how to use these basic functions, such as blend modes, to layer up your images and create interesting compositions. Now, you can use any of the work that you've produced throughout the coursework section of the course. So, anything you've done since you've been putting it into your sketchbook. Anything you've done with me, anything you've done with Mrs. Thompson, photograph it all, get it all on there ready to work into your images. You'll be expected to produce 4 compositions over the 2 hours of lessons that you have allocated to me this week. Those of you aiming higher may want to complete up to 6 variations. Now, the deadline for that, however, isn't until the start of your lesson next week. So I'm just going to say you need to hand that in for Wednesday next week, and we'll start the next part of the work in the class there. So here are some examples of the kind of outcomes that you'll be looking at. So here, the theme I sort of made up. Now, these aren't my images. I haven't drawn these. I did steal them off Pinterest. But they're all different sections. So, for example, in the first image, when we have the boot and the Converse and then the shoe print, they're all 3 different images. And the reason I got these is because you've done similar style pieces of work. So you've done a pen drawing, you've done a pencil drawing, you've also done a screen print, which is, monochromatic, block white and block black. The second one, there is a digital illustration of that shoe, and what I've literally done here is I have put them onto a Photoshop document, and I have used blend modes to put them together. And I've got 2 quite different outcomes from that. Just to give you an example of how you could use text with that, give it a second to load. So an example of using some text with that. So again, I stole a print offline that said buy the shoes, and I've layered them up over with the images. And you can see that I've started to change some of the different colours. So I've made like the shoe print pink, for example, and you can do that with your screen prints. I can show you how you can use blend modes and colours in order to change the colours of them, for example. So I'm going to go through all of this with you so you can go and experiment and try lots of different compositions with your work. Now, I have said 4, some of you may try 6. There's nothing to say why, if you're enjoying it and you want to explore it more in depth, that you couldn't produce more work. It depends upon the speed of which you work and your confidence with using these programs. So let's have a look at Photoshop now then. First thing, how do we create a document? Like I've created one here. So let me just exit that in a moment, and I'm going to create a new document. So once you've got your Photoshop open, you will need to press File and then New. And here you've got your various options. Now, where it says preset, it's very unlikely it will automatically be set to international paper. Mine is preset to that because I have made it so via just constantly using international paper. But if you select that, you'll have the drop downs that will give you things, for example, like A4, A6, A5, A3. I tend to work on A3 just as I think if I print it, that's generally the size of our sketchbook, so that's what I always try and work to. You can name the document beforehand. So I'm going to call it Shoe Edit 1. Okay, and I've got a brand new document. Now, how to open a document. So you go to File and Open, and it's currently set to the file where I'd want it. But for example, just like you would do, you can navigate through your documents as you normally would. So in this one, GCSE Graphics, shoe images, and then this, and again, another shoe image I got off of Pinterest. Now, what happens if I want to add that then into Shoe Edit 1? Really simple. So your toolbar is here down the, if you take your eyes to the left hand side of the screen, and it's the very top one that's selected up here. And all you have to do then is I've gone over the picture, I have clicked using the left click, and I'm holding down that left click, and then I'm going to move the cursor over Shoe Edit 1. I'm still holding that. Still holding the left click, dragging it down, and you can see now as I go over to the document, the cursor's got a little plus in a box added to it. If I now release the left click, it adds it into our document. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is basic transforming. So transform is a really common tool you'll use in Photoshop like all the time, and it's really important that you get to grips with it and you understand how it works. So the very basic thing it can do is make images bigger and smaller. So to activate transform, you need to make sure that the layer is selected. So layer 1 here is actually our shoe layer. So if I use the move tool, I can just move that around. If I hold Control and press T, that will activate transform. Now, if I want to make this bigger or smaller, I can do, but it's really easy, as you can see, to skew the image so it looks, it loses its proportions. And we don't want that. Now, if you do make a mistake like that, you need to be able to access the History tab. The History tab is to the right-hand side towards the top corner, and it's this bit here. If you hover over it, says History. If it disappears, you should be able to find it in the Windows drop-down box as History, and you can tick it to make it reappear. But you can see I've transformed it here. I can just go back and undo that transform if I do anything wrong. So again, I'm going to reactivate transform. Then holding the Shift key, which is that upwards arrow just above Control, that will allow you to make an image bigger without losing its proportions. So you can see here, I've now made that image bigger, and when I'm happy with it, I can press that little tick box at the top, and we're good to go. Now, what happens if I want to put another image on top of that? Well, first thing I'll need to do is get that image in there. So, I'm going to get our shoe image that I've already used. I think it's this one. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, there's our shoes. And again, holding the left click, I'm going to drag that up over our image and drop it. So now that's on top. And what you'll notice is it doesn't permanently steal it from your previous document. It duplicates it onto whatever document you've moved it onto. So you don't just have the one to play with, it will add it to your other document. Now also what is important to note at this point is layer order before we go into blend modes. Now layer order is to do with basically what order your pictures fall on top of one another. Imagine it as like having physical photographs. If you put a photograph down onto the counter and then put another photograph on top of it, you won't be able to see the photograph that's underneath it. And layers work in exactly the same way, but you can play around with different transparencies of layers, or you can work at how the upper layer would interact with the lower layer, or you can cut sections out of it. And so that's how you've got to imagine. It's almost like collaging images on top of one another, either through making them somewhat transparent or transparent in different ways, or by cutting out sections or creating little different sections that you can move and arrange however you like. So if I just flip these around using Move tool, you'll be able to see I can move the pencil crayon shoes on top of the pen drawing shoes, or vice versa. Now, if I want them to interact, I can use lots of different things. So you've got opacity, for example, which I tend to use less of. It just makes it's how basically opaque versus transparent to the point of being invisible it is. But what I tend to do is use blend modes. Now, In photography, we have a lot of lessons dedicated to the use of blend modes, and they are fantastic and the best tool, in my opinion, that Photoshop gives you. I think they're wonderful, but they've got some really simple, nice, easy rules to go by. Darken and lighten are two of the most simple ones. As you can see, darken's on the list and lighten's on the list there. Lighten simply eliminates any dark from that layer and will apply light, a lighter colour to the layer underneath, provided the layer from the top layer is lighter, or the section as it falls on top of one another is lighter than the section below. Probably sounds really odd, but as you can see here, the white pretty much stays, well, the white does stay where it is, and where the black is now, that has disappeared and you can see the image underneath. Conversely, if I do darken, all the light will be eliminated and the black lines will stay. So you can see, you can get the images to layer up with one another quite interestingly, like in quite an interesting fashion. Now, what I do find with this is that you've got to be conscious of the layer underneath. So the pencil crayon shoe layer is quite grey. The paper they've used is quite grey, and then they've added a lot of white on to bring out the white in the shoe. What you can potentially do is use the adjustment panel to alter that greyness and make it more white, so you'll probably have a little bit more freedom in terms of arranging all your different layers together. Let's have a play around with that. So your adjustment panel is again to the right of the screen, and you can see it's labelled up here, adjustments. It's above the layers, adjustments. Now, there's lots of different adjustments, but I'm only really going to look at two for this purpose of just making, off-white tones more white. And I'm going to look at levels and we'll look at brightness and contrast. Now, play around with these, try do levels first and then brightness and contrast after, or vice versa, and see how you feel with it. Now, how we're going to do this today. So there's a couple of little things I need to teach you en route to getting that outcome. So first things first, I'm just going to look at brightness and contrast. Now I've created brightness and contrast. Now because I was already selected on the on the pencil crayon shoe layer, when I've gone and actually selected that adjustment panel, it's created a layer for that adjustment panel above whatever layer I was selected on. Now what will happen is that will affect every single layer underneath it. So I need to connect it to the specific layer I want to affect. So as you can see, I've got it up here, the brightness and contrast, with the brightness slide and the contrast slide to edit. So this little button here, this little square with the downwards arrow, connects it to the layer underneath. So you can see, as I'm selected on this, layer 1 has now become underlined because it's connected and only affects that layer. So I'm going to put the contrast up, and you can see that my colours have got a little bit more vivid, the darks have got darker, but the lights have got lighter. Next thing, while I'm selected on that, I'm going to select levels, and I'm going to do the same once more and press that connecting button. And I'm going to slide it to have more whites. Now it's made it quite extreme, but I can layer up with a little bit more freedom now. Now what I like to do is I don't like to have lots and lots of layers always present. I don't think I'm going to have to go back and edit back into that brightness layer or into that levels layer. I'm quite happy with where they are currently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select layer 1 and I'm going to hold the shift key and I'm going to press levels, the levels layer 1. So that'll connect those two layers and any layer in between it. And I'm going to press Control and select E, and what that does, it merges your layer. Also, just in any sort of like layer that you need to make or edit, there's lots of options available up here on the toolbar. So you've got new layers, you can duplicate layers, you can delete layers through that section. So as you can see now, I've got a little bit more freedom in layering this on top at whatever size I want. And I can go and get more words or prints, for example, if I want to. Yes, buy the shoes. So you can play around and make some interesting compositions. That's quite grayed out, that shoe layer. I need to play around with that one actually and make it more white, don't I? So again, let's just practice that. So I've connected that to that layer straight away, got rid of it by the shoes, nice and clear. And then I can merge those layers together. You have to, by the way, when you merge layers, you quite often have to reapply the blend mode. There we go. So that's kind of the majority of what I wanted you to really learn about in terms of just applying blend modes, thinking about layers, and then starting to arrange your pictures in interesting ways and just making little montages with all the work you've done so far. The next thing I do want to show you is how you can do things like turn that shoe print into pink. And so I'm going to run through how you can change the images to the black sections into pink now. So I've got the shoe selected. What I just want to do prior to that is I just want to go and just unsee the other layers. Now, there are a few different ways you can do this, and you will find that as you get more comfortable with Photoshop, you'll find you have your own sort of little tricks or methods of doing things. And there's a couple of different ways you could do this, but what I'm going to do is, well, I'm actually two different ways, and then you can maybe play around with both, because both, you know, it's good to become quite fluent in Photoshop and get used to all these different skills or ways of doing things. So, first things first, I have the layer of the shoe selected. Now I'm going to hold Control, and if I go over and hover over the icon, the little image of layer 3, it adds a little sort of dotty square to the hand. Select that. And what that will do is it will select out the area of that image. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. There we go, new layer created, and the selection is still on there. Now I'm going to select from the right hand toolbar, I'm going to select the paint bucket tool, and you can select whatever colour you want out from here. So I think this second time around I'm going to make it blue. And in this box I am going to cover the that little area selected in blue. I'm going to press deselect because now I no longer need that selection, which is Control D, or if you go up to the select bar at the top, you can press deselect from up there. So now I've got a blue square that covers the exact size shape as the screen print that we had underneath of the shoe print. So what I'm going to do on the blue square layer now is I'm going to go down to the blend modes and I'm going to put in lighten. And here it has now created a blue shoe print. And then I am going to Control E again, and now we just have a blue shoe print. So I can take that to whatever edit I want to do, drop that on top and change the blend mode to darken, and I can pop that in wherever I like. Hopefully you'll find a slightly better home for it than I have, because I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet, but that's how you do it. So second method I will run through with you now. So I'm back to my original document. Now with this one, you want to still make sure that all your other layers are hidden. So you've pressed the little eyeball to make them disappear. And I now have my lovely shoe up here ready waiting. We're going to go up to the select box at the top and then select colour range. And then from here, I am just going to use, can you see it's a little droplet tool now? I'm going to use that to select the black. So now you can see I've got that selected out in this little preview box. And I press OK, and you can see now all the little sort of dotty moving lines that are making all the selections of where the black are on the shoe. I'm going to use this little turned over post-it down here to create a new layer, or you can go up to layer and then new up here. And now I'm on that selected, I'm selected on that brand new layer, sorry, and I can then select out a colour that I want. So in this case I'm going to go for a nice strong red. I'm going to go to the paintbrush tool, which is on the toolbar on the left hand side, or you can just press the letter B. And I've made my brush a little bit bigger, which you can do up here. And this is the size, how you pick the size, and that's how you pick the brush type. I always go for a softer edge brush. And I'm just going to colour that in by clicking left and painting over. Once I've done that and I'm happy with it, I'm just going to Control and D to make that deselect, and then go back to the move tool, and you can see I've got the red shoe print. Again, I can take that over to wherever I want. and I can use blend modes however I want them to apply that into the work. Get creative and try out lots of things and make some really interesting, nice compositions. As you can see, I've got some nice examples of the work on the PowerPoint earlier on in the video. If you've got any questions, do let me know. Also, don't forget that I've just covered a great deal in this little video, like a great deal. So if you've not used Photoshop at all before, and this is the first time, or you've not used these functions on Photoshop before, use the video, but feel free to pause it and really take your time and go back and watch any information that you need.